How's it going, guys? This is Rio Murata, photographer based in Tokyo. I recently picked up this, I don't know how you call it, sort of like a photography philosophy type of book written by Suzuki Shin. And this person, Suzuki Shin, is a Japanese photographer based in Tokyo actually. And he works as a ShashinKan photographer, aka ShashinKan's basically a family portrait type of photography, but he also does editorial. I think he started his career as an editorial commercial type of photographer who sometimes do those jobs even nowadays, and he also does his personal works as a ShashinKan, aka portrait type of family photographer in Japan. It's interesting because like ShashinKan is it's like a sort of like a distinctive genre in Japan in terms of photography. It doesn't exist in North America, and in Japan there's this cultural thing that when you reach 20, when you graduate, when you have a newborn child, if there's those events in life, people in Japan, if family all together, get together and just get a photo from these small, what we call local Shashinkan type of areas. And this is actually where he excels in, this like photographer Suzuki Shin. And he recently wrote this sort of like philosophy related type of book, and I thought it would be nice to like mention on my channel because not many people talk about Japanese photographers on YouTube, so it would be an interesting thing going on. And I forgot to mention the title. The title is, how should I convert this from Japanese to English? The title would be 7 Ways to Improve Your Photography by Suzuki Shin. And this is not a photo book, like I said, it's just words. And as you can see, it's just words, no photos. But it has a really significant impact for me because I learned so much from this person. And the 7 points actually is, I'll be blunt, is one is purpose, 2 is I, 3 is choice, 4 is median, 5 is self-indulgence, 6 imagination, 7 is continuation, continue. But before going into each and every part, I have to showcase how he organized this book. And it's interesting because the book starts out with him sort of like having some sort of like diagram of a sort of like an anime type of scene, which doesn't make any sense. But after that, he starts out with his first sort of like title. The first chapter is called Purpose, and after that he has a statement going on in Japanese actually. And after that, he asks his fellow Twitter people who are mostly photographers or starting out in photography actually, he gets these questions coming in. He basically answers it with that principle involved, including that principles in his like answer, and in the end he sort of summarizes it. So in this video I'm gonna be talking about each and every chapter. I'm not gonna talk about like every single question that's on this book because that's gonna take forever. I'm gonna just read just 1 or 2 questions that came in from the Twitter account and kind of how he like responds to that. So let's get going. And be aware that this video is going to be super long if I'm right, so I would highly suggest just watching one section, maybe today, another section tomorrow, and another section in the coming days to make your life easier. So let's get going. So the first chapter is called Purpose, and he starts out with, a great photo is something that delivers, transmits to who actually, and what and where is that photo trying to deliver. The purpose starts from understanding what you're trying to convey to the audience, and I guess that's straightforward. And after that, he sort of like asked his like Twitter account followers, and one person asked him, Mr. Suzuki-san, when did you realize you wanted to become a full-time professional photographer in this specific field, and do you have any dreams coming in? And he answers, when there are times both the world and people are constantly changing over the course of the year, one way to live your life is just not choosing what specific type of genre or photography you want to go into, such as, wildlife, sports, life, action, wildlife, I said that again, fashion, commercial, editorial, there's so many genres. I mean, what he says is, you could choose that specific field, or if you don't choose that specific field, what's the most important is it's essential to do everything you can do in that field. And that's what his personal policy is. Whether or not if it's commercial work or for educational purposes, my ShashinKan, his family's type of studio, portrait studio, it's important to understand the effectiveness of photography and applying it into the modern world that's being constantly changing over the course of the years. Film switched to digital. We don't know what's going to happen after digital. And he goes back and forth answering these questions from various people. In the end, sort of summarizes the purpose sections as follows. And he said, I need to search something. I use a dictionary. Is a location that I want to visit. I use a map, Google Map. There's a song that I want to listen. I use Spotify or Apple Music, or I was about to say Amazon Prime, but he didn't say that. And I'm curious about that person over there, and I start thinking about that person. Our ability to sort of like take action starts with a purpose, but finding that specific purpose is also a great purpose. And if you press the shutter, you get a photo automatically. But if you press the shutter randomly, you can never share that enjoyment, that emotional moment with other people because it was spontaneous. Who, why, what, when, and where, and how. This is 5W1H in Japan. What will you like tell them your story? How can you sort of like tell your view, your perspective efficiently? If you keep thinking, and in order to achieve that, you have to choose the correct method that exists right now. It could be photography, it could be videography, it could be cinematography. It's the same thing. There's like so many medias. There's like so many designs. There's like graphic design. There's like illustrations. There's like anime type of animations, After Effects, Premiere, a lot of like media to use. And by understanding like which specific media is great for that specific job, it's important. And he sort of ends this chapter by saying, why do you shoot photos? For joy, for passion, it's fun. This is going to be so long. Chapter 2, the title is called I. So he starts out saying with the basic principles once again, and he says the basic principles of a camera today and our eyes is almost exactly the same. If we understand the mechanism of our eyes, we can pave our way in using our camera correctly. A fellow follower asked him, I'm a beginner photographer and a beginner in photography. I learned photography by myself and went to various workshops, but I don't understand how to shoot it in the way I want it to be. How can I improve my sort of like photography? And he basically answers most workshops, photo classes, in most cases, the majority of them just tells you how to use the camera, how to operate it by comparing previous, like what I call photos taken from famous persons. So just analyzing like old famous photographers, how they did the compositions and stuff like that. But in most cases, they don't teach you what a good photo is. In most cases, how our eyes function and how we self-reflect on what we're thinking, which is much more important than operating the camera itself. Photographs are a means of tools that can be used in sharing and telling other people. Our eyes and our cameras are just sort of like the intermiddle part of that process. And after answering a couple of questions, he sort of sums up as follows. Ever since we are born, our eyes see everything, and we never pay attention to what our eyes are seeing and how it functions. A camera is just imitating our eyes. It was made in accordance to how our eyes work. If we understand how our eyes work, which will coincide when using our cameras, are we seeing the exact same color? This is a really interesting part, actually. And this is due to the fact that if you actually use a Japanese repro paper, so baraita / the paper that you use to sort of like print from color negatives, light sensitive to the paper, so the area that's bright becomes big, it's like baked into the paper. The Japanese papers are actually sort of have a blue tint, if I'm right. And if you do like baking and stuff like that, in North America, the papers made in North America have a slight orangey yellow tint. And what he's trying to say is, I guess it's true that every single person has different perspectives. They see different colors differently. There's basically no absolute color in existence. So there's like no super correct color, because my eyes and your eyes will see this blue completely different. This is a random drink that I'm drinking. But I mean, for me, this looks like a aqua, I don't know, turquoise blue or something. If you're from North America, you might say this might be a very dark shade of blue, and so forth. And because like cameras nowadays, mostly like digital cameras, have more dynamic range than what our eyes see. I mean, if the environment's like really dark, you can basically bump up the ISO and you can basically retrieve the shadows when you're taking a photo. And you can basically sort of mimic what you see within the camera into your sort of like photography, which is like new and aspiring. And by either increasing the exposure or decreasing the exposure, you can basically sort of like tell your audience what that scene was effectively. And chapter 3, and it keeps on going, 3 is about choices actually. Deep excitement, being impressed, happens in an instant. Our eyesight is just one point of focus. Photography is sort of like a continuation of choices being made. Behind every choice we make, there is a reason. By being aware of that reason will make it easier to tell the story. Really thoughtful. A follower asked him after that, is there a suitable personality of becoming an artist, as in a photographer? And if there is, what type of person might be suitable for being a sort of like an artist, an artist photographer? And he basically answers, the clients giving you the job, the model, the people who read the magazines, publications, everyone is living, live people. It's an area to grow communications in the social environment. You will be advantageous if you're good at organizing skills. Photography is basically analyzing the whole scene with composition, and within that period of time that is flowing constantly because time flows, you choose that specific frame and take a photo. That's our job. It's also important to have the skills of taking and throwing choices along the way, sort of in 2022 where it's like culling images. And today, 2022, I use Capture One Pro to edit my photos. And if you're using Lightroom or any kind of like editing software, there's an area of the delete key where you basically delete the photos that you don't want, and the ones you want, you can basically put a tag on it, you can put a star on it, you can put a red dot on it. So in the end, you can basically bunch up those good photos and basically post-process from there. And I guess back in the days during the film eras, the culling task was, I guess, you guys probably made an index sheet. In today's, it would be like a contact sheet in Adobe Bridge or something. There's something called a contact sheet. You can basically replicate an index sheet, print it out, and basically circle the ones that you think are good, and you can cross out the ones that look bad, and you can basically, and that's basically the culling task. And by, I guess, doing it much more effectively, the culling task of like knowing which photo is good, which photo is bad, you will be much more productive and much more efficient in doing that skill, which is helpful as being a photographer. And after that, a different person asked him another question. And good evening. In today's world, we can shoot both video and photos on our digital camera. Like our phones can shoot photos and videos. And which media is good for sharing and telling a story, but what are the specific differences as in telling the whole story? And this was like really inspiring, that answer actually. And he said that photography is cutting out the specific area that we see, the composition that is that specific moment, and leaving it there. In the moments when our hearts get excited, moved, thrilled, our eyes and point of interest match that specific moment, that is photography. Video, however, is closely similar to what we see with our like bare eyes actually, and it's sort of like constantly recording the time that flows throughout the changes that take place. Although both photography and videography or similar media, the characteristics is the complete opposite. And in this chapter, he digressed in saying what's a great digital camera, if I'm right. And he had like 6 points actually, and made a bullet points, so I might as well cover that. So, what is a great digital camera from this guy's perspective? And he said one is speed. Faster than the eye focuses, really fast the exposure speed, time lag after the release, so after you press the shutter, boot up time, read and output. And I guess he never mentioned it in this chapter, but I can understand what he's trying to say, because he currently uses for digital, for film era, let me go back. For film era, he used a Pentax 6.7. He still uses a Pentax 6.7 sometimes during his career, actually, depending on what he shoots. But for digital, he uses an A7S original from Sony. And if you guys know about that digital camera, it came out around in 2013, 2014, somewhere around there. It's the first camera that Sony made. And the characteristics of that camera is, if you guys know, it is probably the lightest camera that Sony made for mirrorless full frame, period. And he stresses this out on his YouTube channel. And he says that over the course of the decade or so when mirrorless camera came out, Sony's cameras, same as Fujifilm and same as for Canon and Nikon's, you guys probably know, all the mirrorless cameras, same for DSLRs, they're getting gigantic. They're getting bigger, and I use Fujifilm cameras. I can vouch it. XT1, XT2, XT3, XT4, XT5 it's definitely it's gaining 10, 20, 30 grams heavier than the predecessors. And this is due to like technological advancements, and if you put new stuff into a camera, it's gonna get heavier, bigger batteries and stuff like that, bigger LCDs and stuff like that. How phones have evolved from the iPhone original to iPhone Pro 6.9 inches. That's like gigantic. It's getting heavier and heavier. Same for cameras. I'm going off topic. And this goes into the part 2 where he says the second point that's like important about buying sort of like a camera, a great camera, is as how quiet it is, not getting noticed by the shutter. The mirrorless cameras nowadays, you can basically press the shutter without having the sound going off. And back in film camera eras, he uses a Pentax 7. The mirror slap is, you get noticed so much, while his A7S camera doesn't make any noise when pressing the shutter. So, and 3, this goes back into the first point where I talked about the sort of like the speed and stuff like that. He talks about the size. It has to be small, portable, and flexible. The smaller it is, the more flexible it is, meaning that you can basically bring it wherever you want. And it should never intimidate the person that you're shooting or yourself, because the larger the camera, you're going to get highly noticed by the surroundings, and at the same time, the bigger the camera, you're going to destroy the atmosphere. So that's interesting. Number 4, he talks about the world revolves around natural energies. We regenerate from being excited by taking more photos, and when we lose that excitement, when we lose that deep emotional moments or being unimpressed, we won't boot up and say that we won't take photos at all, I guess. Number 5 is, he talks about toughness, waterproof, dustproofness, and if you drop something, because we live on sort of like a world where there is gravity, everything we drop is gonna fall, and we have to take into account that the camera will be alright if we drop it from 1 meter above ground, and if it crashes, it's still alright. It has to be sort of like a tank. So I guess he's referring to the old Nikon F series cameras, which were brought to the Arctics and stuff like that. It could take a beatings but still operate fine. And 6 is actually sort of like talking about the aesthetics, the beauty. A camera is something that we will be connected more than our loved ones. You gotta be kidding. I'm a bachelor, by the way, but it's sort of like a tool that takes great photos. People in camera are sort of like a reflection of our inner self and stuff like that. Yes. Chapter 4, he talks about in the middle. So he starts by saying, a beautiful photo comes in a form of having a perfect position. Being polite in front of your subject, if you're shooting a model, the middle area, and maintaining the vertical and horizontal position. Cleaning up the subject's background is important. And in chapter 4, one person asked, when the outer focus area is blurred, does that mean that I'm great at shooting photos? And some of my friends say that I should have blurred the background even more. What's your take on that? And he said, and I was like, okay. So he replied by saying, a photo where the focus is off is shot by a person who is typically senile, aka forgetful, while a photo that is blurry is typically shot by a shaky person who might be wavering, a wavering person, doesn't have a clean motivation in taking that shot. So if you want to understand the basics of photography, I would highly recommend suggesting you to start out using a tripod, mounting your camera on top of there, and pan focusing. Pan focusing means having everything in focus, f11, f16 or so. And on top of that, frame your key subjects, take the proper exposure, not too light, not too dark, then create a photo where there is no escape and making an excuse saying that, oh, I wasn't able to take that shot because my hands were shaky. There was something going into the frame and that right part got cut off. I mean, you could say that excuse when you're hand holding the camera, but if you're on a tripod, no excuses are allowed because you have fully 100% control of that camera on that tripod, and etc, etc, you know. Or if someone comes bashing into your frame, that's highly unlikely. So I guess that's what he was trying to say. And after that, he said that after mastering that, after shooting on a tripod, you can do whatever you want. You can shoot it handheld, or you can do it on, I mean, you can do whatever you want after that. And in the summary, he basically summarized it by saying, in calligraphy and tea ceremony, archery, kendo, judo, the Japanese word is as follows. And in the last, what I call letter, there is something called michi, aka road. And what he's trying to say is that in every lesson, there is a kanji called this road, way. And the courtesy of the subject, having good manners toward your subjects is important. Because there is a subject, we can shoot a photo. We stand in front of our subjects, hold the camera horizontally, vertically in a perfect manner, and we can communicate with our subjects when they make small incremental movements and facial emotions. We can find the slight difference when it happens, and I guess this applies to wildlife photography if you're shooting animals. You can sort of like predict or not predict what that animal will do, because if you have the knowledge of that specific animal, you know that that animal's probably going to move this way or it might move that way. I'm not into wildlife, but if you're a natural type of photographer, you know what I'm talking about. You can sort of predict beforehand, and while if you're shooting models and stuff, you can sort of like force them to sort of like move in a specific direction, or may start a conversation so they will have a sort of like a more happier mood or something like that. So I guess that's what he's trying to say in that section. Chapter 5, we're almost there, guys. It is called self-indulgence. Self-indulgence means being self-centered, and it's important to be yourself. It's important to defy the common sense, do the unusual, and keep being self-centered, as in saying out loud. In the summary, he states that, what is your dream? What do you want to do? A person that says, I don't have anything I want to do, will always say, I can do it or not do it. And based upon that, the actions that are sort of like a result of that. And however, a person who has a dream, who has or finds a dream that they want to do, and it turns that into sort of like they had to take action in order to like achieve it, right? So typically they have a mindset of, I want to do that or I don't want to do that. They have a specific like point of interest, like, I'm not interested in reading this book, I'm interested in reading this book. He's gonna kill me. So and based upon that criteria, do the actions, and in the end you will either get some kind of success or failure in most cases. However, the more times you fail, that failure keeps piling up, and you realize that you're gaining some kind of footprint, some kind of tractions and knowledge the more you fail. The amount of you failed becomes sort of like a self-confidence that the next time you will try it, you will eventually succeed when you're moving forward. And everyone should be in this sort of like mindset. Ugh. And in addition to that, he also said that throughout this sort of like process of taking that road straight, there will be times where you might take a different passage to a different destination. This might be like going into a different field in photography. However, even if it changes midway, as long as you keep moving forward, that motivation does not come from other people's sort of critiquing your work or stuff like that. I mean, that might be important, but instead of the outer influence, it's more likely that your own decision will have the overall impact on your photography career. So when you look at a person, and he also states, this is also interesting, when you look at a person far away, when we see like 100 people far away, you just say they're a bunch of people, right? But when you actually go to that person directly, like 1 meter away from that person, or maybe talk to that person, you know that out of the 100 people, there are no completely exact same person. And this is interesting because each and every person is born in a different era of time. They're born in a different country with different cultural backgrounds. They speak different languages, and they have their own unique interests, their unique like ability to do specific tasks and stuff like that. One person might be great at programming. I suck at programming. I'm not an IT guy. I'm good at taking photos maybe, but yeah, you get my point. He states that it's sort of like important to have your unique style, which can be differentiated with other type of people. Having this unique style, and by forming a sort of like a community around it, or maybe in an organization with unique people, it will enrich ourselves even more. So that's chapter 5. 6 is imaginations. The photographer's creativity, the viewer's imagination, taking the photo, being the ones having the photos being taken, looking at it, listening to others, and bringing that idea outside the comfort zone, outside photography. A person asks, is the future of photography going to be bright in the future? And I thought he was about to say dark in the future. And he basically said, there a long time ago, like a couple of decades or so, it was said that one household, one camera. It's like one household gets one car or something like that. Well, I'm not sure about today, but what he's trying to say. But nowadays, everyone has a camera. Everyone has a smartphone which can shoot photos. And there are more people who can shoot photos with their cameras than the amount of people who can speak the English language. That makes sense, right? A lot of Japanese people, like the majority, don't speak English. And other countries besides the United States and North America, some people, probably a sheer amount of people, don't speak English at all, but they have their different native language. And he was trying to stress out that more people can shoot photos. States that, in other words, the photography language of taking a photo has become a standard way and a standard language that has no borders. And in that scenario, do you think the future of photography will be dark? Apparently not. It will be bright. It will be apparently brighter, actually. So I guess I said it again and again over it, because he does like client jobs and stuff like that, commercial work, editorial works. A follower actually asked him saying about jobs, actually, there are times when clients payout for letting me do the jobs are lower than expected at the initial negotiation for certain jobs. How can I convince those types of clients that are paying lower than I want them to be? And he basically answers that the literacy of the clients will vary a lot, and it's important to be at the same similar like playing field, as in talking to them as if they don't know anything about photography specifically. And you basically have to match what their perspective is, and by communicating verbally, you might be able to negotiate. However, there are those cases where those negotiations don't work out, and if that happens, verbal agreements is not going to work. So part 2 would be bringing out your portfolio. And this is sort of like important. It could be a physical portfolio, a printed works if you're into like hardcore photography, or a website or something, giving your clients sort of like an indication or an idea of what you can offer to them and the reasons why you're trying to get more money out of it, so forth, so forth. And I realize I don't have a website. Crap. so, so I guess he's trying to say that by showing them real life examples of printed works and stuff like that, and if the clients, even if they see it and they say no, you can basically give up and move along with life and basically try to find another client who is willing to pay for your works, your commitment in making that work come to life, actually. So it could be a beautiful photo or video or any kind of work, actually. And he had an example saying that you're basically selling your products at maybe a family restaurant like Denny's, Caesarea, McDonald's, or something like that. Or versus you're selling your products at expensive places such as Wagyu Mafia, Jojoin, expensive places, Tori something. So summary. So I love doing stuff. I love to collect stuff. I love to share similar reactions. I love understanding objects, things that I love. But on the other hand, I hate not understanding that event, that specific time. I hate to give reviews. And if I can stop hating on things, I can enrich myself and grow beyond that. So I don't know equates to it's boring. That's not the case. I don't know equates to having fun. This ideology of being interested is the key of leaping forward, having the curiosity, I guess, and this sort of leads to the journey into the outer world. So a person giving that job, the model person being taking a photo of, the person taking the photo, the person's observing from the outside. Each and every person love themselves by going beyond that. They can give opportunity and creativity, and the person taking that photo can be embodied with that creativity, while the person, the client, the model can bring that imagination into play. So there's this infinite amount of power in imagining your creativity moving forward. And this leads into number 7, which is the last chapter. So chapter 7, continuing. Last but not least is continuing. Continue is probably the most important part. Photography is a sport. There is no quantity, nor there is quality. So it's the most important part. Important to see good photos and having the goal set high. So that's like what an athlete would think. And a person asks, I'm trying to become an artist type of photographer by trying to learn from photographers that have a technique, having the real ability in executing that shot. Is there any way to tell the difference between a great photographer and a bad photographer by looking at their techniques in their photos? If so, I would like an advice. And he responded by saying, within the photo, the arrangement, the plane configuration, color, lighting, highlights such as shadow details, shutter chance, and framing composition, your subject's choosing the correct framing, along with how much information to limit within that shot and restrain, utilizing your eyesight and utilizing the camera mechanism, understanding that, and also with communicating with your subjects, with a pinch of luckiness involved. In order to take great photos is not more like workshops and stuff like that, but it's sort of essential to fully understand the art basis. So in imagination, and he sort of didn't go deep in this, but I'm thinking that he's trying to say that remember the basic art classes you took in university if you went to art school, like everyone, it's like a mandatory class where the teacher basically talks about the prehistoric type of like Renaissance type of art and stuff. I think he's trying to say that it's really important to, although it's not photography, it's like more like oil paintings and stuff like that, it's essential to have some kind of ideology or you call it knowledge in those fields, because back then, a long time ago, a lot of painters, a lot of oil painters and famous like artists made great works back in those eras, which still exist now today. And so many people pay so much of a price for those artworks because they're like, I mean, it's hard to recreate that nowadays, and a lot of people basically like pay for their commitment and doing their artwork. So the Renaissance type of people like have everything in there, like the compositions and stuff like that, and you can learn so much in those basic art classes. And I think he's starting to say that that foundation will help you propel you forward when you're doing your like photography career and stuff like that. And part of the summary, he said that photography is not about quality, not about quantity. This is sort of like a famous quote made by a famous Japanese photographer, Moriyama Daido-san. A lot of people know him for black and white photos. And besides photography, this quote can be applied to almost everything. If you don't practice piano for just one day, in order to recover that, it will take you 2 to 3 days. If you're an athlete and you took a sick leave, your rivals will be working on that day that you took the sick leave, and they will probably do much better than you do when you come back into the field, and your rivals will be better in that sport. What about photography? Photography, the more you invest your time into taking photos, going to museums, going to galleries, going to photo exhibits and stuff like that, it's the exact same thing. And having, and on top of that, self-reflecting, the more times you sort of like shoot that photo, look at the photo, or maybe print it, you can basically sort of evaluate on that, and that basically becomes experience in the long run, similar to like doing sports. We continue to take photos, watch photos, show photos, and keep going in this sort of like virtuous cycle. This is a method of increasing our photographs' overall quality. Although everyone has equal amount of time, we have 24 hours in one day, right? Allocated in our life, and we all live slightly different like lifestyles, we have to work and stuff like that. There are limitations, and depending on how we use that time, and if our life goes into one direction, even if that life ends of not being what we expected, it is the result of the person's own actions, own fault of taking that specific action. So he goes back and saying photography is a sport. Okay, then for using our day, today's such a bright day, what am I doing? How will you use that time? And basically ends the book right there. So that's basically it about this like book that he wrote, Suzuki Shin's How to Improve Your Photography, 7 Ways of Doing It. And yeah, there's no English version, unfortunately, so that's why I made this video. And probably not, I've never seen like YouTubers who shoot photos talk about these sort of like philosophy related type of, I don't know, like videos talking about photography and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know what your take is. I mean, everyone has different backgrounds, how they entered the photography era. I myself went to a photography school, so I learned the basics of photography, but after like working as a full professional e-commerce photographer, and because I'm going to that specific field and on weekends I'm shooting film, I mean, this was really, interesting to read. So yeah, I'm like curious about what your feedback is. Like, do you have like any kind of like famous photographer of the past that you look into, or any kind of aspiring photographers that you like keep referring back to, that give you some kind of like, I don't know, different type of perspective or innovations or stuff like that? So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. And yeah, if you have any questions or comments, please leave it in the area below. So yeah, we'll see you next time. Peace out.